Have you fallen into an open manhole recently? Do you find yourself in the company of strangers? Well, then you might very well be in the feature Underground. Upon further reflection, my name is Hunter Lanier, and I am here yet again in Austin, Texas, with another review from Fantastic Fest. This time it is for Black Phone 2, the sequel, of course, to Sullivan's Travels. Nope, just kidding, it's the sequel to The Black Phone. Only now they have dropped the, so now it's just Black Phone 2, so you might have been confused. The film is once again written and directed by Scott Derrickson and co-written by C. Robert Cargill. And then it also sounds like it might be based on a story from Joe Hill, who wrote the short story that the first film was based on. This Joe Hill, I believe, has no relation to the folk song. And needless to say, there will be no spoilers. I will even be giving you less information than the trailer gives you. I think the trailer shows way too much. I would recommend not watching it. Black Phone 2 really surprised me. I was caught off guard with how much fun I had at this movie. What makes it so good is that it is a totally different movie than the first one. The first movie I thought was fine, but it was fairly pedestrian and safe, although it had more believable emotions than a lot of these horror movies that try to shoehorn in the touchy-feelies with the creepy crawlies. I really liked the domestic elements of the first movie, but I thought the grabber character that Ethan Hawke played, who's the main villain, I thought he was quite terrible. I really find the whole mask thing and the clownish voice thing to be really tired at this point. Where the sequel steers the ship in the right direction, and where in many ways it is the perfect sequel, is that it double downs on everything that works in the first movie. Those domestic relationships that I mentioned, and tosses out everything that didn't work so well, or at least generated apathy. Now you might be wondering, I just said how much I disliked the grabber as a villain, and then I also said that the movie tosses out everything that doesn't work. And yet, we know that the grabber, played by Ethan Hawke, returns for the sequel. How do I reconcile these two things? Well, therein lies perhaps the biggest reason why this movie works so well. Tonally, Black Phone 2 is on a different planet than the first movie. I would go so far as to say that the only commonalities between the first film and the second film are the main characters and some of the themes. Otherwise, this movie is a totally different beast. The first film felt fairly grounded. An abduction drama tinted with supernatural elements, but it largely felt like something that could really happen. The sequel, on the other hand, is a big, wild, supernatural slasher flick. The Nightmare on Elm Street comparisons will be flying around like crazy with this movie, and in the post-film Q&A, Scott Derrickson came up on stage and seemed to very much embrace these comparisons, saying that he found that type of story to have been untouched for long enough to now be fertile ground for returning. And there's where the grabber works much better this time around. Yes, he still has the mask and the dumb voice, but now they exist in this far more extravagant tonal context where they feel much more at home. The grabber is a far more fitting camp character than he is in a semi-realistic abduction drama. And in fact, Ethan Hawke has some really great line deliveries in this movie. He's quoting Dante. At one point, he refers to himself as a bottomless pit of sin. There's a lot of just him sinking his teeth into these deliciously juicy, over-the-top lines. And part of the reason I think the sequel works so much better is that I think Scott Derrickson's sensibilities are far more suited to this 1980s campy style of horror, more so than the first film's more realistic style of horror. There are set pieces and individual moments of gore in this movie that are truly crazy and memorable and like nothing else that was in the first movie. There's one specifically, I won't spoil it, I'll just say it involves a window that is so gross and fun and insane that they did it. And the special effects are really cool. And even aside from the set pieces, this movie is just overall more visually provocative than the first movie. For example, there are simple scenes where Finney, who is the boy in the first movie, now he's late teenager, where he's just outside of his home at night smoking a joint under the porch light. And the whole visual makeup of the scene has this noirish look to it. Even something that benign has so much more visual flavor than the first film. Another small visual thing that is, again, fairly Another small visual thing that, again, is fairly inconspicuous is that at one point in the film, the main location of the film is this youth camp that is in the Rocky Mountains, and it gets snowed in, and it has those Shining vibes. And they sleep in these cabins, and the cabins are dark, very dimly lit, but the only light source in these cabins are these heaters, these S-shaped red heaters that are dispersed throughout the cabin. They almost look like neon signs lighting these cabins with this faint red glow. Again, a small touch, but it really goes a long ways in creating a unique environment. Yet another way Black Phone 2 surpasses its predecessor is with the performances, particularly with the two main actors that play the brother and sister. Their names are Mason Thames and Madeleine McGraw. This time around, they're a few years older, which really helps with their performances. Not that they were bad in the first movie, but this time, since they're a little bit older, they're able to tap into some deeper emotions than before. And of course, the emotions from the first movie have compounded, so they have more to work with now. I also like how the father's story has evolved from the first movie to this one. Also worth mentioning is how much of this movie is shot on an 8mm camera, which Scott Derrickson, the director, uses for the dream sequences, which are plentiful. The softness of the 8mm footage really adds a lot to the overall trippy mood of this movie. There's one moment where the grabber fades into the darkness, and with a sharp digital camera, it would just look like he is overwhelmed by inky blacks. But with the 8mm footage, it looks like he dissolves or dissipates. There's also a great moment when one of the dream sequences ends by having the 8mm footage burn out. In the post-film Q&A, Scott Derrickson even wonders aloud if this movie has the most 8mm footage of any major release ever. Now, of course, the movie isn't perfect. What bothered me most were some of the ancillary characters. In particular, there is a Christian fundamentalist couple who are very religious in a judgmental, standoffish way. And then there's a character named Mustang. She works at the youth camp and is around the same age as the main characters. She wears a perfectly tailored cowgirl outfit, and everything she says is written to be the coolest thing you ever heard, and it never is. Both the couple and Mustang are horrible caricatures. Their dialogue is never believable. Everything they say feels hokey and forced. Not to rag on Shelby Oaks, but I did see that movie the day before I saw Black Phone 2, and the contrast between the two of them is stark. One film has creative set pieces and gore, the other film doesn't. One film is deeply rooted in familial emotions, the other skims the surface. Comparisons with other movies aside, I highly recommend Black Phone 2. I think it's going to be a perfect Halloween movie when it releases, I believe on October 17th. It's scary, but it's also very silly and self-aware, which I think is going to play well with date nights and groups of friends who huddle into a theater on a chilly fall evening. Well, those are all my thoughts on Black Phone 2. Now is the time for you to let me know your thoughts on my thoughts. Next up, I will be seeing If I Had Legs, I'd Kick You, which stars Simpsons writer Conan O'Brien, so I am very much looking forward to that one. Then later in the day, very later in the day, near midnight, I will be attending a secret screening. So I fingers crossed that one is worth ruining my sleep schedule for. Until then, I leave you with the always comforting knowledge that every day underground is a good day.